Man, it's been a long day of snobbing. Think I'm going to check my Facebook, the way that everyone checks their Facebook, on a desktop. Ooh, looks like a fan posted a spicy meme. Let's see what it is. Really? You thought that was funny? Somebody thought that was funny? Somebody made that meme? Somebody touch my spaghetti! Nah, for the record, I thought that meme was hilarious. And also, here's some quality content for you guys. Love you. Hey, it's Mike with Become the Night, and welcome back to this episode of Mike. The Music Snob. Warning. This video contains a lot of music theory terminology. If that bothers or bores you, you should reevaluate your life. For those of you that are somehow still not aware, I have an enormous musical boner for Dream Theater. They are arguably some of the greatest musicians and artists living today. They helped pioneer and revolutionize an entire genre of music. Comparing them to pop music is like comparing fine dining to McDonald's. I'm pretty sure I've already used this analogy before. As was exemplified by Axis of Awesome's song 4 Chords, which is outstanding, by the way.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. No woman, no cry. Yeah, Mama, this surely is a dream. I come from a land down under.
There are chord progressions in musical phrases that have become so commonplace they're essentially tropes now. But if you are truly a good artist, you should be able to take something that is old, familiar, and drab and make it exciting and fresh. The 4 chords that Axis of Awesome is referring to are these chords. As they have demonstrated, popular genres have used these chords to death. Yet, I will be the first to admit they do have a very powerful effect on people. Because of that, not only do artists seek them out intuitively when they are trying to express robust emotions, but they are a tool that most Western songwriters utilize. Now, the more exposure that a person has to something, the more desensitized they become to it. These chords are no exception. Now, great artists can take these commonplace chords and do something special with them, make you feel like it's the first time you have ever heard them. And that's where my boys Dream Theater come in. We want to talk about guys who do not do things the normal way. Their song Ministry of Lost Souls off of the album Systematic Chaos has most likely my favorite outro of any song ever. Now, there are several variants of the 4 chord progression throughout this song, but for purposes of simplification and so we can really examine the impact of this outro, we're going to focus right here. So again, here are our typical 4 chords. Now for this example, instead of sticking with the major key, we are going to go to this key's relative minor. What is a relative minor? In any diatonic scale, you have a set number of notes, and what that scale will sound like depends upon the context of the root note. So essentially, we're playing all of the same notes, we're just starting in a different place. In a pop song, these would typically be repeated over and over throughout a given part of the song, most likely the chorus. Dream Theater takes these 4 chords and alters them slightly. Take a listen. That sounds significantly different, doesn't it? While it does sound quite different, it's actually very close to our original 4 chords from pop. Let's break it down! Here are our standard pop chords again, in their letter form instead of numeral form. And here is our first half of our Dream Theater progression. Some of it looks familiar, and some of it looks a little different. Now, to fully appreciate the harmonic relationships that are happening, we are going to need to dig into the notes of each chord. First chord, A minor, or the tonic of our key. That basically means that every other chord that's going on in this song is all relative to this one. You could call it the root chord, but that's not really the correct term. This directly translates from our pop progression to our Dream Theater progression. Our next chord, F minor, translates to the parallel minor of our F major and our pop chord. So what is a parallel minor or a parallel major? It is a fancy way of saying that each chord has the same root note, in this case, F. If our original chord was F major, that would mean that our parallel minor is F minor, and vice versa. An example. So why did Dream Theater choose to use the parallel minor of the second chord in our pop progression? If we go off of the voicings that I used while playing my guitar, the G string will illustrate why. Notice the difference in feeling? In the original 4 chords, that note is the same in the first and second chord, and then moves down a whole step when going to the third chord. This feels satisfying and easy throughout. In our Dream Theater progression, that note takes a half step down each time we change the chord. This creates a chromatic feel. That first half step down that we take builds a decent amount of tension and builds anticipation to keep moving another half step down, so that once we do, it feels extremely satisfying, but in a different way. The rest of the notes in each of these first 3 chords between both progressions are actually the same. That is the only note that's different. This provides you a sense of familiarity, but at the same time adds a sense of unease. Again, builds tension. Next is our third chord, which, as I have already said, is the same for each progression. It would be C major. As stated before, this is the relative major of our tonic chord, A minor. Because our ears are so adept at being able to hear what is a major key and a minor key in a diatonic scale, arriving at the relative major of this key almost feels like this is our new tonic chord. Almost like it gives us a satisfying resolution. However, that satisfying feeling I described in the Dream Theater chord progression, remember right after we built that tension and then released it? The tension it builds doubles down on the illusion that we are resolving to C major, making it that much more satisfying. Finally, our fourth chord in our pop progression is G major, reinforcing the idea that we may have just switched which chord is tonic. It reinforces this idea because G major is the dominant of C major. Again, I'll explain another time. Just know that this is important. But then it will destroy this illusion by resolving back to the tonic chord A minor. Now, what is special about this? The most common way of resolving back to the tonic chord in a diatonic scale is by using the dominant chord. In this particular key, it would be E minor. If we examine E minor and G major side by side, we see that they actually share 2 notes in common. This provides enough similarity to have a certain amount of satisfaction when we go from G major to A minor. So what chord did Dream Theater use when they wanted to resolve back to the tonic? They used E minor! By using the natural dominant of the minor scale, it adds a certain darkness that would not be there had they used G major. These chords serve similar functions when trying to resolve back to the tonic, but somehow manage to feel polar opposite. And why could they possibly feel polar opposite? Could it be that G major is the relative major of E minor? Isn't that awesome to think about? How they can sound completely different, yet serve very similar functions in the song? Or I guess I'm just really a nerd. So to recap and summarize, by making only slight changes in only 2 chords of this pop cliche progression, we change completely the type of emotions that are evoked. The pop 4 chords give the illusion of a powerful, complicated emotion. Their focus is on the first chord and the third chord, the relative major and minor of one another. Since we associate major keys with happiness and minor keys with sadness, it is the simplest way of pretending to have a complex emotion by bouncing between the 2. Dream Theater's chord progression also focuses on the same 2 chords, but our alterations add a sense of unease and darkness to this chord progression, evoking a feeling of dementia and gravity on top of our tug of war between happiness and sadness. This also giving the edge to sadness. But wait, that's only the first half of our progression. Oh. So our second half of our Dream Theater progression is literally identical to the pop chords? Oh. But wait! There's one catch. Our Dream Theater progression plays each of these progressions twice, but the second time they play it, they add an extra measure to the end and play a G-augmented chord. And this is where shit gets really cool. So what does this chord do? Well, it adds another layer of tension. In addition, it gives a feeling of wonderment and unease, further complicating this already complicated stew of emotions. And then we resolve back to A minor, right? Wrong! Dream Theater screws with your head yet again and modulates the key. For those unaware, to modulate in music theory means to change the key. Moving on. We modulate the C minor, making this seemingly out of place G-augmented chord into an augmented dominant 7th chord. I am not diving into that right now. Just know that it's freaking sweet. Now C minor is our new tonic, and we start the whole progression over again. This progression keeps continuing, and at the end it always modulates up, building up further tension, building it to a point almost like it's sharpening. Between the tension and passion already present in this chord progression and the seemingly endless modulation upwards, it is soul twisting. If this hasn't already been confusing enough, I haven't even touched on the melody yet, which arguably is more important than the chord progression itself. But in the interest of time and not further overloading your brains, what with augmented fourths and flat second passing tones, I think we can leave it here for now. And I know what you're saying. You're saying, but Mike, if it just continually modulates upwards and upwards, the song would never end. It's gotta resolve somewhere, Mike. It's gotta resolve somewhere. Ah, and here lies the absolute beauty, my friends. The song does not stop modulating. It fades out. Now, there is a ton of controversy in the music community saying whether or not fade outs are good or bad. In this particular circumstance, I'd say it's perfect. By building up all of this tension and never really letting it resolve properly or given even a semblance of an ending, it leaves the listener with a sense of longing. Like, how does it end? And they will never know how it ends, an analog to many circumstances in real life. Longing so hard for a proper resolution to circumstance in your life, and you will never get it. What a perfect way to end this song with so much tension that you want to resolve and you can never, ever resolve it. That's powerful. Now, if you aren't quite sure what I'm talking about, or you don't know why I'm so hype about this, I will have a link in the description, time-coded so that it'll start at the outro of this song, and you can listen for yourself. So again, to boil all of this down, our pop 4 chords gives us the illusion of complexity in a battle between bass happiness and bass sadness. Whereas our Dream Theater chord progression demonstrates the unresolved inner conflict of a person who is battling the mind-numbing reality of the loss of a loved one who betrayed them. You think that's a stretch of an interpretation? Listen to the entire song yourself from beginning to end, then you'll have the context, and then you can tell me. So, why doesn't pop employ more of these theory tools to communicate more complex emotions? Because, simply put, the lowest common denominator market caters towards the lowest common denominator. Many people wouldn't necessarily be able to distinguish the subtle nuances without constant exposure to this genre. And for a genre with the word popular built into it, you instantly alienate a large part of the market. It is much more efficient to demonstrate complexity in the most digestible way possible. That way you hit the broadest market. Is that a bad thing? No. Is it an excuse to use it as a substitute for inventive songwriting in far too many of our Western songs? No! Does mass appeal mean that it's better than Dream Theater's nuanced and uncomfortable approach to these chords? Hell no! They perfectly communicate a very complicated emotion of a very specific circumstance. Pop keeps the emotion broad enough to be molded into an infinite number of circumstances, and that lessens its value. So at the end of the day, if I really had to choose who was more masterful in actual music, you can keep your Kendricks, you can keep your Kanyes, you can keep your Jack Whites, you can keep your Cobains. And I'll just sit here sip my whiskey, smoke a cigar, and love my dream theater. This has been Mike, the Music Snob. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Rock on!